Hi Meera ji, I can't hear you. Okay, hello. One second, let me take you into the. One second. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Let's get started. So I'll just introduce and then bring you in. Okay.
Sure.
Alrighty. I'll just take you off and then get the cartoon and then bring you back in.
Okay.
Good evening. Imagine that your bank has failed because it was forced to lend money to friends of the government or cronies of the government, and you went to collect your money, and the bank told you, no, we cannot give you your money. Here's some shares, take our shares. You tell them, but these shares are worthless. So yeah, but in 5-10 years they might get some value. Why don't you hold on to these shares? This is a very, very scary situation that is now facing India and almost all bank holders because the government has decided to introduce something called the FRDI bill, and it's causing a lot of concern in the last 1 week. So I thought, let's sit down with our ex-banker and senior leader Meera Sanyal ji and try to understand what are the banking issues behind this bill and how does it impact the Aam Aadmi of India. I'm also expecting Adarsh Shastri ji to join, although he's on the road since his grandmother was not well. So do bear with me if he doesn't join. But before I get started, let me show you a cartoon that really shows what this bill may look like. That's the that's the perception that almost everybody is having, that once you go to the bank, your money may get lost. Meera ji, welcome to the show.
Hi, Arvind. Very nice to be on this show with you.
Um, Before I start, I remember that some years ago at a NASCOM conference, Jerry Rao of Citibank made a very interesting statement. He said banking is a very simple business. We just take your money, pay you X% interest, and then we lend you the money at Y% interest. And as long as Y is more than X, we make some money. But since the NDA government came to power, it's becoming more and more complicated. All the financial systems are becoming more and more complicated. Why is that happening? Can you throw some light on this?
Well, I think, Arvind, what you've said about Jerry is very, very correct. Banking really is a very simple business. All that a bank does and all that a bank has done through history is take money from depositors. So let us say 100 people give you 100 rupees each and lend that money on to people who need it. So let's say you take 100 into 100, that's 10,000, and you lend out 1,000 to 10 people who need it. Now, what has happened really, and one can't blame the NDA government for this, but the whole banking and financial system has become very, very complex. And so the Aam Aurat and the Aam Aadmi, who really just wants their money to be safe in a bank, is beginning to distrust the whole banking system. And I often say this, a lot of people think that the banking system runs on money. But the truth is that the banking system runs on trust. And over the last few years, people have begun to distrust the Indian banking system. Now, the question is, why is that so?
Mhm.
The reason is that this money which bankers have lent has been lent badly. When your mother or my mother places her fixed deposit in the bank, they expect a reasonable rate of return. 6, 7, 8%, that's all a fixed deposit gives you. But the reason they put it in a bank is that when they want the money, they should get it back. Now, if the banker has gone and lent money to somewhere where they are not going to get it back, then clearly the depositor's money is at risk. And unfortunately, and I really feel very bad saying this, is that there has been a lot of collusion in the banking system. there has been a lot of corruption, and there has been a lot of cronyism. So, corrupt politicians, and this goes across many political parties. I'm not going to say it's only one political party or only one stage in time. It's happened in every government. It's happened in every state government because, we can talk about cooperative banks. So, corrupt politicians in collusion with capitalists put pressure on bankers. Some of the bankers may not necessarily be the most honest people either. And the combination of these three C's has resulted in a huge bad loan problem for the Indian banking system. Of course, some loans are also lent by sheer carelessness. They didn't do their due diligence. But if you look at the size of the problem, today it
Hmm.
is 10 lakh crores of bad debts.
We'll
Now,
get
what
there,
happened?
ma'am. I thought, there's a question which was very interesting and also kind of led into my other question. Why was this done? When I started doing some research, I found that the US started to do some reconstruction activities for the banks after the 2008 crisis, and that led to the G8 and that led to G20. But our drafting seems very lazy. It's almost like we copy pasted the entire US regulation for our own selves. Do you, as a banker, agree with that?
I have to say I do agree with that. And to step back in 2008, what really happened was that you had one big bank failing. So Lehman failed. The US government said, all right, market forces will take over. But that led to a crisis of confidence in the entire banking and financial services system. And so the Fed had to step in, the US government had to step in with what we call a bailout. And they had to pump money into several banks. The same thing happened in the UK and the European Union. And this crisis of 2008, which spilt over into the entire global financial system, by the way, arose for the same reason. Bankers had made very risky bets. They had bet the money of the depositors. And the reason that the regulators stepped in was to protect depositors. Now, when you say, is this lazy drafting? Of course it is. Because if you read the wording, even in our own FRDI bill, what does it say? It says we want to prevent a systemic risk to the economy. Now, what have the central banks around the world done? What has the Fed done? What has the Bank of England done? The first thing they did was they said, let's look at our banking system and identify banks which are too big to fail. So, what you want to do is to limit the exposure of the economy to any one big bank. Now, when we look at that, of course, we should look at what is happening in India. First of all, in any of these countries, the banks were not nationalized, they were all privately held. In India, our banks are nationalized. So the regulator was telling these banks in the US and the UK, your shareholders need to be very careful. But in India, the shareholder is the government. And then what are we doing? Everyone knows now we are amalgamating banks. So, for example, State Bank of India, already we are amalgamating banks into it. So, already our largest bank, which is systemically important, and imagine, if anything were to happen to State Bank of India, we are making that bank even bigger. Whereas regulators in the US and UK are forcing banks to break down, to sell businesses, to become smaller, so that in the, God forbid, if they do fail, they don't create a systemic risk. Now, we are
So,
copying regulation,
sorry, ma'am.
but
I did see that, and this is the point that you were making earlier, that we have around 10 lakh crore of bad loans with the banks, and we had some 2 lakh crores of recent recapitalization. Will this, 2 lakh crores really fix the problem, or are we expecting that this is some kind of a back channel to privatize the banks that, were nationalized in the 1970s?
no, I don't think it is quite candidly, I don't think that that is what the government is planning. But it's a very, very good question. First of all, that clause has not yet gone in. It has been provided for. But the question is, let's say that the government will make that funds available. The question is, what about the balance 8 lakh crores? Now, this is a very simple balance sheet problem, Arvind. On the one side, you have the assets of a bank, which are the loans it makes. The
Hmm.
other side, you have the liabilities of the bank, which is the money it owes to depositors. Now, if your assets go down by 10 lakh crores, which is what has happened, something has to happen on the liability side.
Mhm.
Either the shareholder has to bring more money or the depositors have to lose money. I mean, this is it has to balance at some point in time. Now,
Mhm.
what you want before you bring this bill, I mean, I don't think there is any malified intention in the bill per se. I think the government is, as you correctly say, probably just said, we are part of G20, we must, follow what the Financial Stability Board has said, and that's all fine. But you need to take the steps before you do that, because otherwise everyone is asking the question, what are you going to do about this 8 lakh crores? Are you, as the major shareholder, going to bring it? Or are the depositors going to lose their money? That's a very logical question.
So let me get to the brass tacks. The big problem that we all are talking about is this Rule 52, which kind of gives this bail-in clause, which on the first reading seems like uh, will give unlimited powers to this reconstruction board, where they can decide how much of the money should be returned or how much of the money should be converted to equity or whatever else. The government has gone on it defensive, given out ads, and statements have been made saying this is only on the option of the user. But in such a large country as ours, do people really understand that this is an option? Will bankers actually give any option to the users? Do you think this will work?
No, I mean, I am now, I really am getting quite concerned about the way the government is going about this whole process. Uh, it's very, very clear. I mean, and I think the Honorable Finance Minister has said this, that depositors will be no worse off. And I think it's very important that we all realize that today, if a bank fails, then any depositor in the Indian banking system, whether it's a public sector bank or a private sector bank or a cooperative bank, is protected only up to 1 lakh rupees. So technically, if a bank were to fail and you had more than 1 lakh rupees in the bank, well, then that money technically could be lost. I mean, that is the situation. The issue is that with our banking system in 70 years, and I do say I think we have a good banking system, a robust banking system, and a good regulator. In 70 years, there has been no bank failure. There have been certain banks which have come under, and for example, there was Global Trust Bank, which was a private bank, and that the Reserve Bank of India stepped in and asked Oriental Bank to take it over, for example. In the cooperative banks, the Saraswat Cooperative Bank took over the South Indian Cooperative Bank. And it's quite interesting. I mean, when we are talking about Clause 52, everyone is talking about Cyprus. But there are reports that depositors in the South Indian Cooperative Bank, when it was taken over by Saraswat Cooperative Bank, lost money over and
So,
above the.
so So do you think that, and there were some reports I said and some social media activity that advised people to start pulling out their money from private public sector banks? And do you think that kind of scenario is healthy at all?
No, not at all. And I would really, request everyone who is on this chat to really be sensible, because there is no panic. And the one thing that you don't want is for people to panic and take, hasty decisions. It is a real issue, and the government should address this squarely. Firstly, what are they going to do to capitalize the bank? And secondly, what are they going to do to solve the governance problems? Arvind, why did these bad loans arise? They arose because bankers were susceptible to pressure from politicians. And that is the thing, if that is the person who's your boss, if a senior bureaucrat rings you up or a minister rings you up, and your promotion and your job is dependent on them, well, then, even if you're the most honest and good person, you may succumb to that pressure, right? And if you look at the data, the bad loans in the public sector bank are 12.6% of their total loans. The bad loans in the private sector bank, Indian private sector banks, are only 4.6% of those. And there was a committee by a very, very eminent banker, someone whom I respect very highly, Mr. P.J. Nayak, who was the first chairman of Axis Bank, ex-Ministry of Finance, etc., who had the PJ committee recommendations on how to resolve the governance issues. And he said you have to have independent management, independent boards in public sector banks. That is the first step to getting them to be healthy.
But
Just
we've seen that at least for private sector banks, that independence doesn't exist. And one of the second arguments that I saw the government put out was that very few banks will reach this critical state. This is, don't worry about this provision. But if you're not going to go worry about this provision, why put the provision in the first place? Why create a mechanism that tomorrow can be misused by somebody who wants to accelerate, for example, a write-off? Don't you think this is risky?
Well, what I would say is that really we do need a mechanism for an orderly dissolution, but what they have done is they have put the cart before the horse. Now we know that there is a clear and present gap. Everyone knows that there is a problem. And by the way, this problem hasn't gone away. So this government is saying that these loans were created in the past. All right. Much of that is true. The question is this still happening? And the answer is yes. There is a very big industrialist whom I shall not name, making an investment in a very big project overseas, which again, country I shall not name, but everyone on this chat will probably recognize it. There is an enormous amount of opposition to that project in that country, both politically and on environmental grounds. And one of our largest banks is supposed to have committed a very, very large amount to that project. Now, I mean, anyone putting the pieces together will say that the problem has not stopped. Even if you get someone to invest 8 lakh crores into the Indian banking system, which under today's scenarios is difficult, what are you going to do about the future? And then, Arvind, comes another question. Is there a duty and responsibility of the bankers involved? Yes, I can turn around and say there was pressure on me. But what was my fiduciary duty? And for this reason, both in the United States and in the UK, now bankers are personally liable if they make bad loans. You can actually even go to jail. There are very heavy fines. You get debarred from taking any position in the financial services industry. Now, the reason I'm bringing up all these points is yes, what is the FRDI? It is a bill for the orderly dissolution of a bank should a bank fail. Okay, I accept that. The question is, we know that many of our banks are in a critical position. For the government to say they are not in a critical position, I think is really overstating the case, because many banks, many of our public sector banks, have over 20, 23, 24% of their loans as bad loans. And this is
So
very, very.
if one of the things that was pointed out in my research, it came out quite clearly, is that if people do start pulling out money from the public sector banks because of the reasons that you are saying, that they feel that they are not independent enough, then who will fund our infrastructure projects? Who will fund our farmers? Who will fund the rural capacity? Because clearly that's where the 63% of the deposits are right now, and that's where the government has that flexibility. Do you see that there's going to be an imbalance created because of this, and shouldn't the government just withdraw this regulation?
Well, I what I'm hoping, Arvind, first of all, is that the Joint Parliamentary Committee, which is sitting and which will present its finding in the winter session, is going to raise all these questions, because Parliament really does need to think and really reflect on what does this bill mean, and what is the good it's going to do, and what is the damage it can do. I go back to my earlier point. Banking is about trust and confidence. One of the things we should not do is break the confidence in the Indian banking system. By bringing this bill in a manner which has not been clearly thought out, which has not been explained, and with no answers to basic questions. Basic questions like, how are you going to fund the gap? How are bank managements going to be independent? What are the penalties for bankers who make bad loans? And most importantly, what is the amount of insurance? Is it going to be 1 lakh? Is it going to go up to 10 lakhs? Is it going to go down from 1 lakh? I mean, these are basic questions which people need to know to have that confidence, right? And I think it is incumbent on the Honorable Finance Minister and the Ministry of Finance to explain all of this before they present a bill.
So let me also quickly move the discussion into another topic, because a lot of discussion has gone into the FD and the deposits and the bail-in clause. But there's also a very, very draconian clause that I saw with regard to the cooperative banks. Already we know that the cooperative banks are not well managed. There are lots of politicians who kind of influence it. But the new regulation for cooperative banks pretty much says that the construction authority, reconstruction authority can take over, merge, sell, whatever they feel like with the bank within 2 days of default. I mean, this clearly sounds like there is a plan to finish off all the cooperative sector, which serves the poorest of the poorest people, the rural people with no banks can reach. What are your views? Have you looked at this particular part of the clause?
I have, Arvind, and once again, my personal belief is that there is no malified intention in the drafting of this bill. But as you pointed out, it seems to be a lazy bill. I don't think people have really thought this through. The issue with the cooperative banks, and we saw this in the demonetization as well. For example, they were very badly hit in demonetization because there appears to be, from the regulatory point of view or from the Ministry of Finance point of view, extreme distrust of the cooperative banking sector. They really believe that this is a problem area, and indeed, from a security different reasons that you have described. A proof of that, for example, is where you say our deposits are insured. The insuring agency is called DICGC, which is the Deposit Insurance Credit Guarantee Corporation. Now, in the last three consecutive years, 2014, 15, and 16, each year the cooperative banking sector has received insurance payouts of 5,000 crores. We know that many of our cooperative banks are sick. We know that many of our cooperative banks are failing. So, my belief is the reason that the regulator or the Ministry of Finance have put it is a recognition that there is a problem in the cooperative banking sector. However, once again, they haven't explained what are they going to do to make these banks healthy. Before you decide how to wind down a bank and wind down the banking system, you need to put in place a plan which is credible as to how these institutions will be made healthy. Because if you don't tell us that, then the assumption is you're planning to close it down. Like, I mean, as you correctly read it, if the law says that we can close it down in two days, then people are going to get panic stricken, right? Instead, you should say, this is our plan. What are we planning to do? वो उन्होंने बताया ही नहीं है तो फिर क्या कर सकते हैं?
Good that you spoke in Hindi because there's a lot of requests from our followers that Hindi is better. So let's spend some time talking a little bit in Hindi. और मैं वापस आपसे ये बेसिक जो सवाल ये था कि since almost independence, people have had a blind faith in banks. That our money is safe in bank. हम बोलते हैं fixed deposit safe होता है और equity और mutual fund बाकी सब में risk है. मतलब the whole financial system has been trying to tell us कि बाकी सब में risk है fixed deposit. Why is the government tinkering with this notion of trust? What do you think is the right way to do this?
देखिए अरविंद, मेरी एक दोस्त थी, उन्होंने मुझसे ये कहा था कि मीरा, मैं सब बैंकर को डिस्ट्रस्ट करती हूँ। आप लोग केवल एक चीज चाहते हो, हमें प्रोडक्ट सेल करना। कोई आता है, कोई कहता है इंश्योरेंस खरीदो, कोई कहता है ये म्यूचुअल फंड खरीदो, कोई कहता है ये करो वो करो फलान ढिमकान। तो उसने कहा कि देखो, मेरे जो पैसे हैं मैंने बहुत मेहनत से इसको कमाए हैं। और शी वॉज इन एडवर्टाइजिंग, शी सेज व्हेन आई थिंक ऑफ माई मनी, आई थिंक ऑफ अ नेस्ट with an egg in it, and that egg is very precious to me. वो मेरे लिए बहुत कीमती हैं, जो मेरे पैसे हैं, मैंने बहुत मेहनत से उन्हें कमाया है। लेकिन आप जो हो, जो बैंकर्स हो, आप इस नजरिया से नहीं देखते हैं मेरे पैसे को। And one thing I will say, Arvind, who are the depositors? Who are people who have fixed deposits? You and me, we may be investing in a mutual fund, and जो हमारे बच्चे हैं वो थोड़े ज़्यादा savvy हैं, आजकल बिटकॉइन की बात हो रही है, etc. etc. But think of our parents, okay? My mother-in-law, you know, they are dependent on the interest of the fixed deposit. They are very self-respecting. वो नहीं चाहते कि वो बच्चों के ऊपर दे शुड नॉट बी, उनके ऊपर बोझा ना हो, बर्डन ना हो। तो उनके जो फिक्स डिपॉजिट है, जो पेंशन का जो पैसा आता है, वो सब बैंक में रखा हुआ है। एंड बोथ माई मदर एंड मदर इन लॉ, दे आर लाइफ लॉन्ग कस्टमर्स ऑफ वन ऑफ स्टेट बैंक ऑफ इंडिया, यूको बैंक वगैरह वगैरह। मैं उनको कहती हूँ आप शिफ्ट कर लीजिए, दूसरे बैंक में डाल दीजिए। नहीं नहीं, मैं मतलब मेरे 50 साल से अकाउंट है, 60 साल से अकाउंट है। तो दिस ट्रस्ट इज अ वेरी वेरी प्रेशियस थिंग। और मेरा ये मानना है कि सरकार ने ये जानबूझकर नहीं किया है। दे हैव नॉट वांटेड टू ब्रेक द ट्रस्ट, लेकिन थोड़ी इसमें ना समझी है। दे हैव नॉट गिवन इट द अटेंशन इट डिजर्व्स, आई थिंक। I think they have not read the situation properly.
I agree with you. I think we are running a little bit out of time. I also feel that somehow the power of the RBI over the banks is being moved into this regulatory body, which will be appointed and managed by the finance ministry. There is a tinkering of almost all financial institutions that is happening. But just to close, I saw this very nice comment from one of the researchers that I kind of was trying to look for. And I'm going to read it out. Hopefully, people can see it on the screen as well. And it said that the country that voted for Vikas must question uh, the policies unleashed by this government that doesn't seem to understand serious issues like finance. This is a very, very serious comment. If our government doesn't understand finance, then God save us. What do you think?
Well, Arvind, it is, as you say, a very serious, it's in a way, many people will say it's a harsh comment. But if we look at the three major things that happened in the finance sector, yeah, first was demonetization. And as I've often said, yes, maybe the intentions of demonetization were honorable and we all agree with them. But the implementation, first of all, whether it was a good policy, most economists don't agree. I also don't agree. But anyway, whatever it is. But the implementation was just catastrophic. It was a big disaster. I mean, people have really suffered. We say economy ka 2% niche gaya hai, but people have lost livelihoods. 120 people lost their life. It was a big thing. And businesses have suffered. I mean, there's been a huge impact. Then आप जीएसटी को देखें, yes, I personally agree जीएसटी is good for the country. But जिस तरीके से आपने उसको implement किया है, I mean businesses are really suffering. खास करके जो छोटे businessmen हैं, they have been battered by it. Yes, government is amending as you go along. But Arvind, someone once described to me, this was an overseas colleague, from a central bank. He says, Meera, your Indian economy is like the Titanic. It is a huge ship. Even if you see an iceberg, to turn around will take you a long time. So, and what he then went on to say, and this is now 5, 6 years ago, he says, you are very lucky. You have a central bank which is one of the best central banks in the world. And Arvind, that is true. Our Reserve Bank of India has been an institution all of us could be really proud of. Unfortunately, as you say, it seems they are under tremendous pressure and they are not able to withstand this pressure because I'm sure if the RBI, not just the governor but other people had been consulted, they would have pointed this out. I mean, I am convinced about it that the real damage which is happening, not only in these policies which are harming the economy, but in the institutions which are being damaged. And that is a big loss.
Well, I sincerely hope that the parliamentary committee comes back with some wiser counsel. But the way the government has been defending, I think we should prepare for a long fight, and we should be prepared to take our money out or take our money to some more safer places. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining in. I hope people enjoy this. This is a new tool we are trying, so do bear with us if everything doesn't work out. But thanks very much. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined, by the way. Thank you very much.